Hi Year 11, today we're going to have a look at fieldwork. So this is the final section of your mock exam. There will be a series of shorter questions followed by a longer 8-mark question. Now, obviously we haven't been out and done any human fieldwork, and that's not a problem because now your exam won't include any questions on fieldwork that we have specifically done. However, you will need to understand what the process of fieldwork is and be able to apply it to different situations in the exam. So first of all, we need to remind ourselves of the steps of carrying out a geographical enquiry and what the process is. If you think back to your trip to Bradgate Park, this might give you some ideas of the different steps and stages that we go through. Pause the video here to see if you can come up with your own. So firstly, you must come up with a fieldwork question or a hypothesis. So this question is something that you want to find out, or the hypothesis is a prediction of what you think you will find that you will either prove right or wrong. You'll then, using your question, think about how you're going to collect the data and what your methods will be. For example, there are primary methods and secondary methods. Primary data is data that you collect yourself, whereas secondary data is data that's collected by somebody else that's useful to your investigation that you'll use. Before you go out, it's also important to do a risk assessment where you have a think about where you're going, what the risks involved are, and think about how you will then reduce those risks. You'll then go out and collect your data using collection sheets, so things like tables and tally charts. When you get back to school, you then present your data, so you'll think about the best and most suitable ways. So for example, what graphs or charts to use. Once you've made those, you'll then analyse what they are about or what they are showing. So to analyse, you describe what you found and then explain and give reasons for that. Finally, you will come to a conclusion, and that's when you go back to your original fieldwork question or your hypothesis and answer your question or say whether you were correct or not with your hypothesis by summarising your key findings. All good inquiries then finish with an evaluation, and this is where you think critically about the good things and the bad things about your inquiry. So what has gone well and what kind of things could we improve in the future? Maybe what was bias or what were the limitations of our results. So coming up with an inquiry question. In this example, we're thinking about human geography. And so I've bullet pointed down some of the themes that we study in human geography. What I'd like you to do is to pause the video and think about some questions you could investigate about urban or rural areas, the way people live, migration, or resources. So some different examples might be what challenges or what are the main challenges that a certain area faces, such as Leicester. Could be things like how do different people's lives vary, people's ways of life vary within the same area. Or if we think about resource reliance, it could be thinking about how ethical people's purchases when they're buying food items are. So are they buying fair trade? For the purpose of the rest of this session, we've picked an inquiry question that we're going to have a look at and go through the different stages. So we have picked, to what extent has Hull been influenced by migration? Okay, so in order to answer this research question, we need to think about our methods. So what primary data would we collect and what secondary data could we collect? There's a task on your worksheet, so give 3 methods of collecting data suitable for answering your inquiry question, and then be able to explain how each of these could help you to answer the inquiry question. Try and pause the video here to come up with your own methods. If you're struggling, continue to play the video in order to see some ideas to help you. Okay, so some examples of data that you could collect might be surveys or questionnaires, interviews, photographs of the streets or area where we're investigating, census data, and Google Maps or Street View images. So if you're using these, now think about, are these primary or secondary data sources, and how would they actually help you to answer the question, to what extent has Hull been influenced by migration? Make sure you've completed and finished tasks 1 and 2 on your worksheet. One really common method of data collection are surveys and questionnaires. See if you can write a question that would be suitable to ask as part of your survey, thinking about Hull and migration. So the survey, why would this be useful? Well, you could go and ask different people living in Hull about their experiences with migration. You could ask open and closed questions. Open questions are where someone can respond with whatever they want. A closed question is where they have different categories or a tick box to answer. Questions will probably be based around where people have migrated from, why have they migrated, and what changes they've noticed since moving. However, we have to be really careful with the way in which we ask our questions, as some information could be quite personal. So you've got a picture there of the city centre in Hull. Using this picture and your own knowledge of going to an urban area, can you state 2 risks of undertaking fieldwork in this location, and then explain how we could reduce those risks? You have space on your worksheet to fill this in. Pause the video here for a few minutes to make sure you've filled out that section. So you've collected your results and you're back in school now, and now we need to think about ways which we can present our data that we've collected. So you need to think about the ways in which we can present it in a clear way and make sure it's most suitable. Different types of data presentation include creating graphs, charts, maps, or even annotations. Think of the different methods we used to present data at Bradgate Park. Now, for sources A and B that you can see at the bottom of the screen, I want you to explain how each piece of data would be best presented and be able to justify your reasons why. So if you decide on a bar chart or a pie chart, explain why that would be most suitable. Okay, so we've presented our results and now we come to the analysis. So this is describing each piece of data and explaining reasons for your findings. You can see that I've included one of the sources on this slide. So have a go at analysing the graph. You'll see this task on your worksheet and you've got some sentence starters to help you, remembering to link back to our original question about Hull's being influenced by migration. Okay, so we're nearly at the end of our inquiry process now and we're thinking about the conclusion. So we're going back to our inquiry question or a hypothesis if that's what you've done, and we're going back to answer it by summarising our main findings. In the green box you see that I've included a little bit of a guideline of what to include depending on your target grades. So if you're going for a grade 1 to 3, you need to use at least 2 sources of information to help you answer that question, all the way up to a grade 7 and above. To do this, you'll need to open the source sheets attached separately on Show My Homework. Typically, when you come to a conclusion, this would be a longer style question. So we'll imagine this is worth 8 marks. Ideally, you'll be writing 2 to 3 paragraphs to summarise our main findings. You'll need to spend a little bit of time planning what each paragraph will say, and then you'll need about 15 minutes to answer this question this time around. In the exam, this might be more like 10 minutes. So pause the video and have a go before you continue. And finally, we need to think about evaluating our inquiry process. So we go back to our methods and we consider how accurate our results are, where we think we might have got errors, and how our errors might have affected our results. What I've done is I have looked at 2 of our methods and I have written really bad evaluations. What you need to do is turn it into a good evaluation. So think about referring to the limitations of the data, if there was any bias involved, issues with sampling, which might lead to bias, and the sample size, how many people were asked as part of our inquiry process. This should probably take you about 10 minutes, so pause the video for 10 minutes to have a go. Okay, so well done for working your way through this fieldwork video. I hope you found it useful. Please try to remember the different steps of your inquiry process and be creative and understand how it would link to different fieldwork scenarios for your exam.